The Frozen Voyage. The starship Eridanes Promise had been drifting through the void for 317 years when Commander Ilara Voss first heard the signal. It came as a whisper through the quantum relay, a faint heartbeat of electromagnetic pulses that shouldn't have existed. Earth had fallen silent 2 centuries ago. Everyone knew that. Every human colony scattered across the spiral arm knew that. The homeworld was gone, consumed by war, plague, or perhaps something worse. The records were incomplete, fragmented by distance and time. Ilara stood in the observation deck, her reflection ghostly against the infinite darkness beyond the reinforced glass. She was 43 years old by biological count, though the cryosleep cycles meant she'd only been conscious for 11 of those years. Her hair, once black as deep space, now carried threads of silver at the temples. Her eyes, sharp and gray, had seen more than most humans would in 10 lifetimes. Behind her, the ship hummed with the low frequency of fusion reactors burning hydrogen fuel that would last another 500 years if they were careful. "Commander, you need to see this," called Lieutenant Tobias Chen from the communications console. His voice carried that particular edge of controlled panic that veterans learned to mask but never quite eliminated. Tobias was younger than Ilara by a decade, born on Mars colony before the collapse, back when humanity still believed it could reclaim what it had lost. Ilara crossed the deck in long strides, her boots magnetic against the deck plating. The Eridanes Promise was a generation ship, one of 12 launched during humanity's final coordinated effort to preserve the species. 700 souls slept in cryobanks below, dreaming cold dreams while the universe aged around them. Only a skeleton crew of 15 rotated through waking shifts, maintaining systems, watching for hazards, keeping vigil over the frozen multitude. The communication station was a nest of holographic displays and ancient hardwired terminals. Technology had regressed after the collapse. What couldn't be maintained was abandoned. What couldn't be replicated was treasured. The quantum relay was one of humanity's last miracles, a device that bent spacetime itself to transmit information faster than light, at least in theory. In practice, it was temperamental, energy-hungry, and half the time it picked up nothing but cosmic background radiation. But not today. "Audio is corrupted," Tobias said, his fingers dancing across the interface. "But the pattern is unmistakable. This is a human transmission, Commander. Origin point." He paused, recalculating. "Sol system. Earth's lunar orbit." The words hung in the recycled air like a verdict. Ilara felt her pulse quicken despite years of combat training, despite the neural implants that regulated her stress hormones. Earth. The word itself was mythology now, a prayer spoken by children who would never see blue skies or feel rain on their skin. "Impossible," whispered Dr. Sana Okoye from the doorway. The ship's chief scientist had appeared silently, her dark eyes wide with something between hope and terror. Sana was brilliant, uncompromising, and absolutely convinced that Earth had been sterilized during the final war. She'd written 3 papers on the subject, published in the last academic journal humanity had managed to circulate before the communication networks failed. "Play it," Ilara ordered. Static filled the room, thick and oppressive. Then, through the noise, a voice emerged. It was broken, distorted by distance and interference, but undeniably human. The words were scattered, incomplete fragments. "Anyone, receiving, coordinates, survivors. Earth, not dead, repeat, not dead." The message looped 3 times before degrading into pure noise. Silence followed, heavy as gravity. "How old is this transmission?" Ilara asked, her voice steady despite the earthquake in her chest. Tobias worked the calculations, cross-referencing timestamps and quantum decay signatures. Based on the relay's propagation model, approximately 7 months. It's been traveling through fold space, bouncing off relay stations that might not even exist anymore. It's a miracle it reached us at all. "Or a trap," Sana said quietly. The Krell used human distress signals during the border wars. Lured colony ships into ambush zones. This could be. The Krell are gone, Elara interrupted. We confirmed their extinction 40 years ago. Their empire collapsed into civil war and consumed itself. She turned to Tobias. Can you extract coordinates? He nodded, already working. It'll take time. The encoding is ancient, pre-collapse standard. But yes, I can get a location. Elara looked out the viewport again, toward the distant point of light that might have been Sol if human eyes could see that far. 317 years ago, Eridani's promise had launched from Europa Station with a mandate: preserve humanity, find habitable worlds, establish colonies beyond the reach of whatever darkness had swallowed Earth. They'd traveled 17 light-years, crossed the vast emptiness between stars, and now they were bound for Kepler 442b, a world the old surveys had rated as 97% Earth-compatible. But Earth wasn't dead. Maybe. How many are in cryo? She asked. 683, answered Chief Engineer Marcus Kane, who joined them during the transmission. Marcus was built like a cargo hauler, broad shoulders, massive hands, a face that looked carved from lunar regolith. He'd been awake for 16 years, the longest continuous consciousness of anyone aboard. The price showed in the deep lines around his eyes, the tremor in his left hand that he thought nobody noticed. And our fuel reserves? Sufficient to reach Kepler 442b with a 30% margin, Marcus said. If we divert to Earth, we'd burn through most of that margin. We'd reach Sol system, but we might not have enough to escape again if things go wrong. Things always go wrong, muttered Sanaa. Elara closed her eyes, feeling the weight of 700 lives pressing down on her shoulders. 700 dreamers who trusted her, trusted this ship, trusted the promise that somewhere out there, humanity could start again. She thought of the children in Cryobay 3, born on Mars and Luna and the orbital platforms of Jupiter. They'd never known Earth. Would never know it unless she made a choice that defied every protocol, every safety regulation, every logical calculation. But the voice on that transmission. The desperate, broken hope in those words. Earth, not dead. Plot a course, she said. Sanaa's head snapped around. Elara, you can't be serious. That signal could be decades old by the time we arrive. It could be a malfunction, a ghost echo from before the collapse. We have a mission. The mission was to preserve humanity, Elara said, meeting her friend's eyes. If Earth survived, if there are people there who held on while we ran, we owe them. We owe them everything. And if we arrive to find nothing but ruins and radiation? Sanaa challenged. If we strand ourselves in a dead system and condemn everyone in those cryobanks to slow death when our supplies run out? Then we'll die trying to go home, Elara said softly. Better than dying in the dark, pretending we never heard them calling. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the ship's ambient systems seemed to hold their breath. Finally, Marcus nodded. I'll need 4 hours to recalculate the navigation algorithms. We'll have to adjust our deceleration burn, ration fuel more carefully. It's going to be tight, Commander. Make it work, Elara said. Tobias looked up from his console, something like reverence in his young face. I've got the coordinates. Lunar orbit, exactly as the transmission indicated. There's something else. A station designation in the metadata. Tranquility Archive. Elara felt a chill run down her spine. Tranquility Base. The site of humanity's first lunar landing, over 4 centuries ago. If anyone had survived Earth's death throes, if anyone had preserved the old knowledge, the old dreams, it would be there. At the place where humanity first looked up and said we can go further. Alter course, she commanded. We're going home. As the ship's massive engines began their slow rotation, redirecting thrust toward a destination none of them had ever expected to see, Elara stood at the viewport and watched the stars shift. Somewhere out there, impossibly far and impossibly close, Earth waited. And for the first time in 317 years, the last children of humanity turned their faces toward the sun that had birthed them. The journey had changed. The mission had changed. Everything had changed. But hope, that most human of emotions, burned brighter than any star. Ghosts in the void. The Eridani's promise burned hard for 3 weeks, her fusion drives pushing against the physics of interstellar travel with the desperation of a drowning man clawing toward surface light. Elara had authorized a 10% increase in reactor output, a dangerous gamble that made Marcus wince every time he checked the engineering readouts. The containment fields flickered amber on his diagnostics, dancing too close to critical thresholds, but they held. They always held, because Marcus Kane didn't build things that failed. In the observation lounge, Dr. Sana Okoye stood before a holographic projection of Earth as it had been 3 centuries ago. Blue oceans, green continents, swirling white clouds that spoke of weather patterns and living ecosystems. She'd reconstructed this image from archival data, pieced together from fragments and corrupted files like an archaeologist assembling a broken vase. But it was incomplete. Whole sections flickered with static where information had been lost to time and electromagnetic decay. "You're torturing yourself," said Father Gabriel Torres, approaching from behind with 2 cups of recycled coffee. The chaplain was 70 years old by biological count, one of the few who'd been awake since launch. His face carried the weathered patience of a man who'd heard every confession, witnessed every grief, and still chose to believe in grace. Sana accepted the coffee without looking away from Earth. "I'm preparing myself for disappointment." "There's a difference." "Is there?" Gabriel settled into a chair, his joints creaking in a way the ship's medical bay couldn't quite fix. Age was humanity's most persistent enemy, more relentless than war or plague. "You've been staring at that projection for 6 hours. That's not preparation. That's prayer." "I don't pray," Sana said flatly. "Everyone prays, Doctor. We just use different words for it." Gabriel sipped his coffee, grimaced at the taste, synthetic compounds could only approximate the real thing, and continued. "You're hoping I'm wrong. Hoping we find something. That terrifies you more than finding nothing at all." Sana finally turned to face him. Her eyes were bloodshot, her normally immaculate hair pulled back in a hasty knot. "If Earth survived, it means we abandoned them. 700 people fled to the stars while millions, billions, died or suffered or fought to hold on. How do we face that, Gabriel? How do I look survivors in the eye and explain that we gave up? We didn't give up. We were ordered to launch. The colony protocols were clear. Protocols written by people who assumed Earth would die," Sana interrupted. "Assumptions we built our entire mission around. If they were wrong." She shook her head, unable to finish. The ship trembled slightly, a microquake in the deck plating as the engines adjusted thrust vectors. Somewhere below, in the cryobanks, 700 dreamers slept on, unaware that their destination had changed, unaware that everything they'd been promised might be a lie. On the bridge, Lieutenant Tobias Chen was drowning in data. 3 centuries of silence from Earth, and now the quantum relay was suddenly alive with signals, dozens of them, hundreds, all broadcasting from various points in the Sol system. Most were automated distress beacons, decades or centuries old, their power sources long exhausted but their final messages still echoing through the void like digital ghosts. "This one's from Mars," Tobias muttered, flagging another transmission. "Olympus Colony, broadcast date, 247 years ago. Standard evacuation protocol message." They were loading the last transports when he trailed off, reading the corrupted text. "When something attacked. No specification what." Elara leaned over his shoulder, reading the fragmented report. The words were clinical, bureaucratic, but between the lines she could read the panic. "Hostile forces. Atmospheric bombardment. Civilian casualties critical." And then nothing. Just silence and the infinite patience of dead machines continuing to broadcast to an audience that would never come. Any recent signals? She asked. Anything from the last decade? Tobias shook his head. Just the one from Tranquility Archive. Everything else is archaeological. We're listening to a graveyard, Commander. Then we keep listening, Elara said. There's a difference between dead and dormant. If someone survived long enough to send that message 7 months ago, they might still be alive now. Or they might have died 7 months ago, and were chasing their last words, countered Sanaa, who'd entered the bridge with Gabriel in tow. We need to consider the possibility that we're already too late. Elara met her gaze steadily. We consider it. We prepare for it. But we don't let it stop us. The bridge fell silent except for the ambient hum of electronics and life support. Outside the viewports, the stars burned with ancient light, photons that had traveled years or centuries to reach human eyes. Distance was a kind of time machine, Elara thought. Everything they saw was history, light from dead or dying suns. Maybe that's all they'd find at Earth, the light of something that had already ended. Commander, Marcus's voice crackled through the intercom. We've got a problem in Reactor 3. Containment field is fluctuating. Nothing critical yet, but if we maintain this burn rate for another week, we're risking a cascade failure. Elara closed her eyes, calculating. 3 weeks to Sol system at current speed. If they reduced thrust, it would take 5 weeks, maybe 6. More time for systems to fail, more resources consumed, more risk of something catastrophic happening in the deep dark between stars. Can you stabilize it? She asked. I can try. But I'm not a miracle worker, Commander. These reactors were designed for steady-state operations, not sprint burns across light years. Do your best, Chief. Bridge out. Elara cut the connection and turned to her assembled crew. We knew this would be difficult. The ship wasn't designed for course changes this dramatic. But we're committed now. We see it through. And if the reactors fail? Sanaa pressed. If we lose containment halfway to Earth? Then we wake the engineers from cryo and fix it, Elara said. And if we can't fix it, we drift until we die or until we don't. Those are the only options now. We don't turn back. Tobias looked up from his console, his young face pale but determined. Commander, I'm picking up something new. Another signal just came through the relay. It's different from the others. Different how? It's not automated. It's live. Someone's transmitting right now, real time, from Earth orbit. His fingers flew across the interface, isolating the signal, filtering out interference. Audio is clearer than the first message. They've got power, Commander. They've got active communications. The bridge seemed to hold its breath. Play it, Elara ordered. The speakers crackled to life, and a woman's voice filled the room. It was young, urgent, speaking in standard English with an accent that no living human on Eridani's promise had ever heard, the accent of Earth itself, preserved and evolved in isolation for 3 centuries. This is Tranquility Archive Station to any human vessels in range. We detect your approach. We see your engines burning. Please respond. We are the keepers. We have maintained the watch. Earth endures. Humanity endures. Please tell us we're not alone anymore. The transmission ended. In the silence that followed, Elara heard someone sob, a quick, choked sound that might have come from Tobias or Sanaa or even herself. 300 years of separation, 300 years of believing the homeworld was ash and memory, and here was proof. Not just survival, but civilization. Organization. Hope. Send a response, Elara commanded, her voice rough with emotion she didn't bother to hide. Tell them the promise is coming home. Tobias worked quickly, encoding the message, routing it through the quantum relay. The transmission would take hours to reach Earth, hours more for a response, but it didn't matter. Contact had been made. The silence was broken. As the message transmitted, Elara found herself staring at the holographic Earth Sanaa had left rotating in the observation lounge display. She thought about the word the transmission had used, keepers. It implied purpose, duty, a conscious choice to remain when others had fled. Who were these people? What had they endured? What kind of world had they built from the ashes? 3 weeks, she said quietly. In 3 weeks, we'll have answers. Gabriel Torres smiled, the expression transforming his weathered face. In 3 weeks, Dr. Okoye, you'll get to see if your prayers were answered. Sanaa didn't respond, but Elara saw the way her hands trembled as she clutched her coffee cup. Saw the hope and terror warring in her eyes. They were all afraid now, afraid of what they'd find, afraid of what it meant, afraid that after 3 centuries of running, going home might be the most dangerous thing humanity had ever attempted. But they were going anyway. Because that's what humans did. They went toward the unknown. They answered when called. They refused to let distance or time or the vast indifference of the universe convince them to stop caring about each other. The engines burned. The ship flew on. And ahead, invisible but inevitable, Earth waited to reveal what humanity had become in the long night of separation that the Keepers welcome. The response came 14 hours later, while Elara was supposed to be sleeping. Sleep had become a theoretical concept anyway, something other people did, something her body craved but her mind refused to permit. She was in her quarters, reviewing fuel consumption reports for the 3rd time, when Tobias's voice crackled through the intercom with barely controlled excitement. "Commander, you need to get to the bridge. Now." She was moving before he finished speaking, pulling on her uniform jacket as she ran through corridors that had become as familiar as her own heartbeat. The ship was quiet in the night cycle, most of the skeleton crew resting while automated systems maintained their vigil. Her boots echoed against the deck plating, a rhythm that matched her racing pulse. The bridge was lit with the blue-white glow of active displays. Tobias sat at communications, Gabriel stood behind him with one hand on the younger man's shoulder, and Marcus had apparently abandoned the engineering deck to witness whatever had prompted the summons. All 3 turned as Elara entered, and the expressions on their faces told her everything before anyone spoke. They answered, Tobias said simply, and pressed play. The woman's voice returned, clearer now, with less interference. Elara could hear background sounds, the hum of equipment, distant voices speaking in urgent tones, the particular acoustic signature of a large enclosed space. Eridani's promise, this is Keeper Director Amara Osei, Tranquility Archive Station. Your transmission has been received and, forgive me, I'm crying. We haven't heard from another human ship in 237 years. The last colony vessel to make contact was Titan's Hope in 2288. We believed we were the last. That everyone who left had died in the dark, or forgotten us, or simply moved too far away to ever return. A pause. The sound of someone taking a shaky breath. We are transmitting coordinates for a safe approach vector. Earth's orbital space is heavily damaged, debris fields, derelict stations, unstable satellites. Do not attempt atmospheric entry without our guidance. We have maintained some infrastructure, but much was lost during the collapse and the wars after. We number approximately 40,000 souls across 3 major settlements, Tranquility Archive, New Singapore Orbital Platform, and the terrestrial preserve in what was once called New Zealand. We have food, water, medical facilities. We have been waiting for this moment for so long. Another pause, longer this time. Please be advised, Earth is not the world you left. The atmosphere has stabilized, the radiation has faded to manageable levels, but the scars remain. Entire continents are wilderness now, reclaimed by nature. The oceans have shifted. Many of the old cities are gone, swallowed by rising seas or destroyed in the final war. But we survive. We endure. We have kept the lights burning in the hope that someone would see them and come home. The transmission shifted, and a different voice spoke, male, older, carrying the weight of authority and exhaustion. This is Chief Engineer Deo Okoro. We're uploading technical specifications for docking at Tranquility. Our facilities can accommodate your vessel, though it will be tight. We have fuel reserves sufficient to replenish your hydrogen stocks, manufactured through solar-powered electrolysis. We've been stockpiling for decades against the possibility of exactly this moment. When you arrive, come to Docking Bay 7. We'll be waiting. A third voice, younger and bright with barely contained joy, this is Dr. Kenji Sato, Xenobiology Division. We have preserved genetic samples from Earth's biosphere, plants, animals, insects, microorganisms. If you're bound for a new world, we can help you seed it with Earth's legacy. We can help you build gardens in the stars. The transmission ended with coordinates and technical data streaming across Tobias's screens. Elara stared at the information, her mind struggling to process what she'd just heard. 40,000 survivors. Infrastructure. Resources. Hope. They've been alone for 2 centuries, Gabriel said softly, his voice thick with emotion. Maintaining technology, preserving knowledge, keeping watch for ships that never came. What kind of faith does that require? The desperate kind, Sana said from the doorway. She'd arrived silently, drawn by the transmission like everyone else. Her skepticism had cracked, revealing something raw underneath, wonder, maybe, or fear of wonder. They're offering us fuel. Technical support. They want to help us continue our mission. They don't want us to stay, Marcus observed, reading between the lines. They're survivors, not recruiters. They know Earth can't support a sudden influx of 700 more people. They're offering assistance so we can leave again. Elara nodded slowly, understanding the terrible calculus the keepers had made. 40,000 people clinging to survival on a damaged world couldn't absorb 700 newcomers without risking collapse. But they could help. They could give Eridanes Promise what she needed to reach Kepler 442b. They could ensure that humanity's expansion didn't end in the void between stars. Send a response, Elara ordered. Confirm we're accepting their assistance. Tell them we're honored to meet the people who refuse to let Earth die. Tobias worked quickly, his fingers dancing across the interface. As the message transmitted, Elara moved to the viewport and stared out at the stars. Somewhere ahead, still invisible to human eyes, Earth hung in the darkness. Home. The word felt strange now, loaded with meaning she'd never had to confront before. Home wasn't just a place. It was people. It was continuity. It was the thread that connected 300 years of separation and said you belong here, you came from this, you matter. We're 3 days out, Marcus announced, checking the navigation display. At current velocity, we'll reach lunar orbit 72 hours from now. Assuming the reactor holds. It'll hold, Elara said with more confidence than she felt. Make sure we're ready for visual contact. I want every telescope, every sensor, every camera we have pointed at Earth when we're close enough to see her. The next 3 days blurred together in a frenzy of preparation. The skeleton crew worked double shifts, running diagnostics, checking systems, preparing for the first human contact with Earth in over 2 centuries. Sana coordinated with Dr. Sato, exchanging preliminary data about Eridanes Promise's mission parameters and Kepler 442b's environmental surveys. Marcus engaged in technical discussions with Chief Engineer Okoro, comparing notes on reactor maintenance and fuel purification processes that had diverged over 300 years of isolation. And Elara found herself in long conversations with Keeper Director Amara Osei, learning about the world that had survived while humanity scattered to the stars. The collapse had been worse than the fragmentary record suggested. Nuclear exchanges, biological weapons, climate cascade failures, everything that could go wrong had gone wrong simultaneously. Earth's population had plummeted from 9 billion to less than 300 million in the span of 50 years. Most died in the initial conflicts. More died in the famines and plagues that followed. The survivors had clustered in regions that remained habitable, building new communities from the ruins of the old world. The Keepers had emerged from a coalition of scientists, engineers, and archivists who'd retreated to lunar facilities during the worst of the wars after. They'd watched Earth burn from the safety of Tranquility Base, and when the fires finally died, they'd made a choice: preserve what could be preserved, maintain what could be maintained, and wait for the scattered children of humanity to remember their home. "We knew the colony ships had launched," Amara explained during one transmission. "We had records of 12 vessels departing between 2242 and 2247. We knew you were out there, carrying humanity's future in your cryobanks. We couldn't follow. We didn't have the resources or the technology. But we could keep the lights on. We could make sure that if anyone ever came back, there would be something to come back to." On the third day, as Eridani's promise crossed the heliopause and officially entered the Sol system, Tobias began receiving visual data. The first images were grainy, distorted by distance and the limitations of their aging optical systems, but they were unmistakable. Earth. Blue and white and brown, scarred but alive, turning in the eternal dance with Luna. The continents were different, coastlines redrawn by risen seas, forests spreading where cities had been, deserts blooming where human engineering had once forced the land into submission. But it was Earth. Undeniably, impossibly Earth. Ilara ordered the images broadcast throughout the ship. "Let the sleeping multitude dream of this. Let them know, somewhere in the deep places where consciousness flickered during cryosleep, that they were coming home." The crew gathered in the observation lounge, watching in silence as Earth grew larger in the viewport. No one spoke. There were no words adequate to the moment. Gabriel wept openly, his aged face streaming with tears he didn't bother to hide. Sanaa stood rigid, her arms wrapped around herself, staring at the world she believed was dead. Marcus gripped the railing until his knuckles went white, his engineer's mind probably cataloging damage and calculating what it would take to rebuild, but his eyes held wonder. And Ilara felt something break open inside her chest, some locked room she hadn't known existed, some reserve of emotion she'd kept sealed because feeling it would have made the long voyage unbearable. She'd spent 300 years running from Earth, carrying the weight of extinction, believing that humanity's only future lay in distant stars and alien worlds. But Earth had survived. Against every probability, against all logic and calculation, the homeworld had endured. "We're being hailed," Tobias said quietly. "Tranquility Archive. They want to guide us in." Ilara straightened, pushing the emotion down and back where it belonged. Time for wonder later. Now was for duty. Accept the hail. Let's go home. The voice that came through was Amara Osei's, steady and warm and infinitely welcoming. "Eridani's promise, this is Tranquility Control. We have you on our scopes. Welcome to Earth orbit. Welcome home." And for the first time in 317 years, a human ship followed the Keeper's guidance toward the cradle of humanity, toward the world that had birthed them all, toward a reunion that should have been impossible but was happening anyway because humans were stubborn and hope was stronger than despair. The journey was ending. The homecoming was beginning. And nothing would ever be the same.